4 writers, 4 different audiences, 4 different sets of sources, and not one of them agrees with the other on much when it comes to small details. But when each one arrives at the single moment their whole book has been building toward, they all reach for the same small Greek word. Topos. A place, a spot, a location. Matthew uses it, Mark uses it, Luke uses it, John uses it. And in none of the 4 accounts does that word ever grow into anything bigger. Here's what makes that strange. These are writers who are not shy about elevation anywhere else in their books. Jesus goes up a mountain to teach. He goes up a mountain to pray. He's transfigured on a high mountain. The Mount of Olives carries its height in its own name. So these men clearly had the vocabulary for up. And then they reach the most important location in the entire story, and they say, a place. Nobody in any of the 4 Gospels ever goes up to Golgotha. They go out to it. We've all seen the painting. 3 crosses on a bare rise, dark sky behind them, a crowd shrunk to specks at the bottom of the frame. That image is centuries deep in the Christian imagination. But the text underneath it is flat, deliberately, consistently flat. And once you notice that, a real question opens up. If the gospel writers weren't giving us a hill, what were they giving us? The hill didn't come from nowhere, and nobody invented it to deceive anyone. Luke writes that they came to the place called cranion, the Greek word for skull, which is where English gets cranium. Matthew, Mark, and John give us the Aramaic behind it, Golgotha, and translate it, the place of a skull. When that word crossed into Latin, it became Calvaria. Calvaria became, in English, Calvary. Somewhere in that handoff, a common description turned into a proper noun. A place on a map can have a shape, and once a location has a name, it starts collecting a picture, especially once painters need somewhere to put the most important death in history, where the eye is drawn upward, not down into a crowd. That's not dishonesty. That's just how art solves a real problem. But the solution eventually got mistaken for the report. The word that actually does the theological heavy lifting isn't Golgotha. It's a smaller word, and it shows up in the oldest layer of Christian preaching about the cross. Exo, outside. John writes that the crucifixion happened near the city, and Hebrews states it flatly. Jesus suffered exo tes pilis, outside the gate. Not near the gate, outside it. A wall in the ancient world wasn't just defense, it was a statement about categories. Inside was the city, the covenant life, the temple with its smoke rising. Outside was everything the community had decided didn't belong inside. Refuse heaps, tombs, quarries, executions. Leviticus is explicit. Burial happens outside the camp. Ceremonial uncleanness is quarantined outside the camp. Stoning happens outside. The line wasn't casual. It was theological geography, and every resident of Jerusalem knew exactly which side of it they stood on at any given hour. Rome had its own reasons for the same boundary. Crucifixion stayed out of the cities Rome governed, partly to avoid provoking local religious sensitivities, partly because the punishment needed an audience of travelers, and travelers are found on roads, not inside city walls. 2 systems, Jewish and Roman, pushing the same direction. Out. Which means Golgotha wasn't a summit chosen for visibility from a distance. It was disposal ground, pressed right against the wall, close enough that a person standing there could smell bread baking inside it. Not a landscape, a boundary. Here's the detail that quietly dismantles the painting. At the end, John writes that someone soaked a sponge in sour wine, put it on a stalk of hyssop, and lifted it to Jesus' mouth. Hyssop is the plant used in Israel's purification rituals, bushy and chosen because it holds liquid. Commentators who've measured it describe stalks running somewhere between a few inches and, on a related species, 3 or 4 feet. That's the length of a walking stick. A man standing on the ground, arm raised, holding a stick that size, reached Jesus' mouth. Do the arithmetic in your own body. Stand up. Raise your hand as high as it goes. Add a stick. Whatever height that puts you at, that's roughly where his face was. Not 30 feet up, eye level, or a little above it. Matthew and Mark tell us the same thing a different way. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads. Passed by. Not gathered on a hillside to watch. People on their way somewhere, whose route happened to take them past 3 men fixed to beams a few paces off the road, close enough to read the charge nailed above his head, written, John adds, in 3 languages, because the sign was aimed at whatever traffic happened to be walking through. That's Passover week. That road was full. Psalm 22 says it centuries early. All who see me mock me. They shake their heads. If Golgotha sits on a distant rise, that's poetry. Beside a road, at the height of an ordinary man, it stops being poetry and starts being a description of exactly what happened. He wasn't remote. He was close enough to be spat at. The physical evidence points the same direction. In 1968, construction work on the northern edge of Jerusalem broke into a first-century tomb. Inside was an ossuary inscribed with the name Jehohanan, holding the bones of a man in his 20s. One heel bone still had an iron nail through it, bent back on itself after striking a knot in the wood. That bend is the only reason the nail never came out. The family couldn't remove it, so they buried him with it still in place. Scholars still argue over the exact posture the bones imply, and it's honest to say the reconstruction has been revised more than once. But it establishes 2 things without much room for doubt. Nails were real, and a crucified man could still be taken down and buried like anyone else, exactly what the Gospels describe happening to Jesus a few hours after nightfall, on the same patch of ground. Quick word before we go on. If a study like this is giving you something real, consider becoming a channel member. It's what keeps this research and production going, and it's what keeps every study here free for anyone who needs it. To everyone already supporting this work, thank you. You're the reason it keeps existing. There's a chapter almost nobody memorizes in Leviticus, describing the Day of Atonement. The high priest carried blood into the most holy place, all the way in to the center, to the presence of God. And the bodies of those same animals were carried out of the camp entirely and burned to ash, all the way out past the boundary. One offering, moving in 2 directions at once. The writer of Hebrews knew that chapter, and knew exactly where Jesus died, and put the 2 side by side. The bodies of the animals are burned outside the camp, and so Jesus also suffered outside the gate to make the people holy through his own blood. That is the entire sacrificial logic of Israel landing on a specific patch of ground on a Friday morning. He didn't die inside the temple courts, among the incense and the singing. He died where the leftovers were burned. Then Hebrews does something nobody expects. It doesn't say, "Be grateful he went out there so you can stay comfortably inside." It says, "Let us go out to him, bearing the disgrace he bore." The call is toward Christ, not away from anyone. The place the system marked off as disposal ground has become the meeting place. Every one of us keeps an inside-the-wall version of ourselves, the one with a tidy answer when someone asks how we're doing, and an outside-the-wall version, the failure nobody's heard about, the part of the story we've quietly agreed belongs beyond the boundary. Most religion assumes God's address is inside, and that reaching him means cleaning up enough to be let through the gate. The geography of the cross says something else. He went out, past the wall, onto the ground the city had already used up, into the place where the discarded things go. That's where he was standing when he did the thing that makes people clean. Which means the part of your life you assume disqualifies you isn't somewhere he hasn't already been. He didn't die above the world, remote on a summit you have to climb toward. He died in it, at eye level, on a road, close enough to be mocked to his face. And the same word that describes that ground is the word Hebrews uses to call you there. Not up, out. If this study opened something up for you, subscribing helps put it in front of someone else who's looking for it. Leave a word in the comments. Even one word helps this reach people we'd never reach otherwise. And if you know someone who's convinced they're standing outside, send them this. He already went out to meet them there.